Every single one of us carry something that is unique to who you are and what you're created in this time frame. And I think there's an invitation. Sometimes we just have to be given permission to dream. The Lord's creative, and He's set you up for such greatness.
They catch me on my way up, watch me, not slowing down and I'm not saying sorry.
Hey, I'm Kylie Jean, and I am so excited for today because we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, and that is vision. And I know I kind of toss it around there all the time, but I kind of wanted to give a little bit more of like a practical breakdown of what is vision and how is that something that intersects in our normal everyday life. Vision is really something that kind of leads us forward. At least for me, it's been a pillar of something that has felt down the line that I've made decisions leading up to that vision. Vision is a picture. It could be this internal picture of something that we have in a sense of really something that we're leading our lives towards and creating that comes from our value system. So you can have a vision for the way that you want your career to go. You can have a plan of action in which you want to be able to grow, rise the ranks, or kind of a directional move that you want to make in that. You can have a vision for the family culture that you want to create, your friend culture. You can have a vision for even the things that you want in your personal life, the car you drive, the house that you live in, the character traits when people encounter you. Those are all elements and pieces of vision. Vision's not just one big blanket thing. It's a gift that we get to grow in and that gets to change with time because we're always growing and changing in our lives. Not everything stays the same. However, there is pillar aspects of vision that usually are with us throughout the entirety of our life that cause us to be able to make those directional moves to grow forward, that we get to say no to the greater yeses. Those are very key in that way.
Vision can be established really young.
Super
I think
young.
vision is established young. And I think when we're young, it's so important because you can either be established to have no vision for your life, or you can have parents who really intentionally build into their children and not only teach them how to have vision, but they show it by example, and then they encourage you in whatever your vision's like.
One of my favorite questions to ask people is what they wanted to be when they were a little kid, because, you know, you only are able to grasp on to concepts that you have the revelation of when, you know, you're at a certain stage of life. So when you're a little kid and you say, for me, if you were to ask me when I was in elementary school, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be the first girl in the NFL. And at the time, girls were not in the NFL. And so, yeah, still, hopefully it stays that way for a bit. So I would say I want to be the first girl in the NFL because for me, like, football was a very connective experience that I had with my dad. My dad loved watching college football. He would toss the football with me when I would pal around with him. And it just was something that brought me so much life. And then I also loved singing. My mom's like, you came out of the womb singing. So I would be like, I want to be the first girl in the NFL and I want to sing worship. And so I would be with my grandfather and I'd spend a lot of time with him. He would go work on job sites. And when I'd be with him, he would introduce me to those around him. And he'd say, hey, this is my granddaughter, Kylie Jean, and she's going to be the first girl in the NFL. And he could have easily have been like, hey, girls can't actually play football. Like, girls aren't allowed to be in the NFL. But instead, he affirmed something that he probably didn't even realize went so much bigger than the concept of a work arena, of an occupation. And he always would affirm that. And so because of that, I felt very believed in and very celebrated. And obviously, with time, you realize I'm not going to be the first girl in the NFL, nor do I actually really want to be. However, it was super interesting because as I got older and I started walking out my career paths and going through these open doors that were really only like God open doors, I started doing a lot of sports media. And then I started doing sideline reporting in the Arena Football League that led into college football things. And I realized, oh, wow, I had a lot of insane favor literally on football fields. Like, crazy things. I would get invited to like friends and family, and I wouldn't even have friends and family in the NFL. And I would get invited to the friends and family football practices where then I remember, this is a wild story, but it kind of plays into the vision aspect. When I was in the Arena Football League, I had, first of all, Arena Football, if you're familiar with it at all, which I don't actually know how many people are, it's totally different rules than college football or the NFL. And when I got a phone call, somebody had seen a reel of mine. I got a phone call once and they said, hey, have you ever done live TV? And I said, I can do live TV. They're like, great. Can you be on a flight to Tampa tomorrow? I said, absolutely. So I get on this flight. I'm on the flight, I'm studying, I'm learning these new rules. And I get there, there's like some really interesting dynamics at play. And I realize, oh, what makes arena football so fun is that you have full access to the field the entire time. So as a sideline reporter, I'm like, oh, I actually got to like be wherever. I could be like in the craziness, the chaos. You can have fun getting the stories. You can interact with people. There wasn't the limitations and the boundaries that happen in college football or the NFL. And there's a lot of players who will play Arena League football or like in the Canadian League, and then they'll jump up to the NFL. So at this point in time, there was this moment where the quarterback for this Arena League football team had gotten a really, really bad injury. And so as a reporter, I'm supposed to go get the injury report. So I remember I went, I got the injury report. And after I gave the report, I just had this feeling in me, like, I really feel like I'm supposed to pray for this guy, but they're in the middle of a game and like that wouldn't even be appropriate for the dynamics at play. And so there's a bunch of medical around him. So in my heart and in my spirit, I just like put my hand, I think even on like a medic's shoulder, like not even on the person. And I just prayed a really simple prayer of healing over this guy. And I felt like the Lord gave me an encouraging word for him. But again, wouldn't it be appropriate for that setting or the context? So it was super, super quick. Nobody even knew that I did that. And crazily enough, miraculously enough, the guy like turns out to be totally fine on something that was supposed to wipe him out on the season. He finishes playing the rest of the game. And afterwards I went up to him and I said, hey, like this might sound really crazy, but I really felt like I had an encouragement for you. Would it be okay if I shared? And he's like, yeah, sure. And so I shared this word that I really felt like the Lord gave me for him. Really brief, didn't camp on it. Never thought I'd ever see him again. A couple years later, so that's like in the Arena Football League. A couple years later, I wildly got invited to Seahawks friends and family practice and woke up that morning, was not planning on going, ended up getting a phone call, show up, get like brought into VIP. I'm like, this is so fun. I had like so much fun. For me, being on a football field just like brought so much life. And so the fact that I'm like, wow, my entire mom's side of the family were multi-generation Seattle. They love the Seahawks, and that I got to be there for that energy. I knew the Lord was speaking to me. And so there was a player on the field and I recognized his last name. And I was like, that's so crazy. How do I know that last name? And I was like, he looks really familiar. How did I figure it out? And then all of a sudden, when the practice ended, he takes off his helmet and his wife comes on the field. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the QB from the Arena Football League from like years before. That's wild. And so they walk over to the area where like friends and family are hanging out. And I was like, hey, you might not remember me. He's like, oh my gosh, Kylie Jean. And then like word for word shared what I had said to him. And then he shared how that actually came into play in his life. And it was one of those really cool moments where I realized like out of the overflow of who you are and what you believe to be and the vision that you're operating in obedience to, it's going to then be effective to those that are around you. It's going to be like a splash zone to the people that come into your life. And you never know how just stepping out in total obedience, for me, it was total obedience to the Lord. Nobody even knew that I said a prayer. And then I went up and encouraged this guy afterwards. It felt really cool to be able to see that come back full circle. I think that's the kindness of the Lord, is that he allows these opportunities where we like not only get to build vision for our own lives, we get to speak into the vision of other people's lives. And I think there's something very key about that. I don't know if you heard of that.
Yeah, I think going back to what your grandfather did to you, which is what you did to the QB.
Yeah.
I think it's really fascinating. Your grandfather built two things by doing that. He built one into your present by probably making you feel so proud because you didn't know what he was saying. You're a little girl.
Right.
But you're on these building sites, right? And you're with all these probably old raggedy men. And all you hear is your grandfather say something that expresses love and approval. And so in that moment, you're like, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. I'm going to be the first girl in the NFL. And the coolest thing about words and what we've been talking about with identity is that it builds the future.
Totally.
And so not only did he build into your presence and build you up as a little girl there, he built your identity up, but he also spoke into your future and he spoke blessing over those things in football and what that was going to look like. So I think, and the same with you, that you spoke to that quarterback and you were able to you were able to speak into his present where he was physically healed from something that could have knocked him down. And you built his future in a way where it gave him vision to run toward it, to the fact where years later he could recite it word by word.
So wild.
That's how important our words are.
They're the most powerful, actually. and they build things up and they can tear things down, not only for ourselves, but for others. And there's ways that in life we need to build our vision. And sometimes we have to step back and even reassess. And I know for me, growing up, I love vision so much because of my dad and the way that my dad led my family in that way. And there would be moments that, I don't know, he just would know even when I was really young, it's like, we need to step back. We need to recalibrate some things and we need to lift our sights higher. So my dad would take me to like a point where, like a physical place where the vision was elevated. So we grew up in California. So there would be times when I was really little and there was like a really beautiful home called Hearst Castle that people could go tour. And my dad would choose a tour that had like some very grand views. And we'd take this tour. And he would talk about somebody who had vision for this property, somebody who he would like use the excitement of somebody else's vision to then bring encouragement into our own lives and realize like, oh, there's so much that's so much bigger than ourselves. And sometimes you just have to recalculate the vision. So where now as an adult, or like when I was little, my parents traveled a lot and they would take one of us kids to travel with them. And my dad would go on college campuses and we would walk the football fields because that was him and I's thing. Was college football, obviously, and we would talk the vision. He would ask us like really good questions about ourselves. He would ask us good questions about what's in our heart, where we see our lives going. He would help us paint detailed photos in our heart and in our mind's eye that we got something to build our lives forward to. So even as an adult now, there's moments where I go, okay, I think I need to reassess the vision or I need to recalibrate a little bit. And for me, it helps to physically get into a space where I can see something so much bigger than myself. You and I were on a trip the other day, and we were inland in Florida, and we did a complete spontaneous audible. We went to West Palm, and it's because, at least for me, I'm like, I needed to see the vision. I needed to see the ocean. I needed to see something so much bigger than myself. I needed to be in an airspace where it had people who were more successful, people who lived in realms of thinking that had no limitations and no cap, because I had some caps that I wanted to remove. And so to be in that airspace where I could see, oh, there's people who are growing their lives in this way. There's physically the terrain is like so much more vast than what I can see in other spaces, where then I can sit back, I can partner with the Lord and reassess the vision. Those are like helpful little key things that help us in our normal everyday lives. It's learning to quiet ourselves down. Habakkuk 2 is one of my favorite layouts in scripture, where it gives us this really incredible kind of game plan on how to lean into the heart of the Lord, how to learn how to hear his voice. We can quiet ourselves down. We can fix our eyes on Jesus. We can tune into the vision and the spontaneity of the Holy Spirit. We can write it down, and we can create that vision that we move our lives forward to. Everything's right there in scripture. We literally have such an incredible game plan that is very applicable to our normal everyday lives.
Habakkuk 2, verse 2 says, Lord answered me, write down this vision and clearly inscribe it on the tablets so a herald may run with it. For the vision awaits an appointed time. It testifies of the end and does not lie. Though it lingers, wait for it, since it will surely come out and will not delay. And I think that is so cool how it speaks to vision. Write the vision on tablets, other versions say.
I think even in the first verse, he talks about standing on the ramparts.
I will stand at my guard post and station myself on the ramparts. I will watch to see what he will say to me and how I should answer when corrected.
It's something about his expanding your horizon, being able to clear that line of sight. Watch. Exactly what you said. It builds towards something that surely will come to pass. Right. See in part, know in part.
I love that. I think somebody who is saying, yes, this is cool. I like it. I'll sign on. Where do I start? Yeah. I love that. That is one of your favorite questions you ask people is, what did you want to be when you grew up? Mm-hmm. It's kind of going back to that and saying, well, maybe as a little girl, you said, I want to be in the NFL. Uh-huh. But what was the motivator behind that? What did you want to do? What actually about that stood out? Because now I can see that you are really great at running a team. Mm-hmm. You know how to pick people and you know how to build others up around you in a way where you can get a lot of people around you and you can run with a vision. Mm-hmm. You are great at establishing a vision. And sometimes it's really helpful to have people around you who are really good at the details.
The details and the execution.
of executing that vision.
That's true.
And so it's fun. You can talk to people and be like, oh, I wanted to be a scientist or something. You can kind of understand like, oh, they're really smart. They love figuring out puzzles.
Right.
And so I think it's something you can even do with your own life is go back and see when it was such a simpler time in your mind and in your little spirit, what lit you up.
Right. And I think that thing that lights us up when we're little, there's so many times where that's where the enemy wants to come in and he wants to squander.
Every time.
He wants to bring disappointment.
Every time.
He wants to make you not believe in yourself. And I think if we can go back to that place when we were young and ask those kind of questions that seem really simple and can seem really silly sometimes, that actually there's a joy in the purity of, oh, at this point in life, I wanted to be this. And again, if we think multidimensionally, we can start to realize there's something greater that was at play that we couldn't even understand. I remember the first time I did a speaking event with Riley Gaines, and she shared that she wanted to be a dentist. She was planning on going to dental school. And she kind of was saying how silly it was. And I was like, that's so cool that you wanted to be a dentist because biblically, teeth represent wisdom. And she has been a huge mouthpiece in this time of truth. It's who she is. And she couldn't have tried to do what she did. The Lord put her in that space, but she was willing. She was willing to stand for what she knew was truth. She was willing to stand for what she knew was right and what was righteous. And she was able to be a voice for those who weren't even able to speak up for themselves, no matter the cost. And it was costly. It was costly. But then on the other side of it, there has been such great gains. And so I think if we step back and we realize, if we step back and we realize like, oh yeah, what is that thing? Well, we can start to interpret it differently.
It's truly, we see in part and we know in part. And so sometimes it's not like, oh, you only get half the plans.
Right.
Sometimes the plans are one thing, but it was a symbol for another.
Absolutely.
It's like dream interpretation.
Which is so fun.
Which is like sleeping dream interpretation, but also vision dream interpretation. Sometimes things can be symbols. You can say, oh, I really want to go to dental school, but actually the Lord was just biblically speaking to her, oh, you're going to be able to speak and to protect and to strengthen the wisdom in people.
And actually, because of her being able and willing to be a voice, it activated others to be a voice. Exactly. That's all of us. Every single one of us carry something that is unique to who you are and what you're created in this time frame. And I think there's an invitation and there's a joy to step back and to even ask ourselves these questions, to do what it says in Habakkuk 2, to quiet ourselves down, to fix our eyes on Jesus, to tune into the spontaneity of the Lord, and even write down some of these things that he's putting an impression upon our heart and our spirit. And you'll be able to mobilize forward. You'll be able to shift that vision in the places that you need to adjust. You'll be able to dare to dream. Sometimes we just have to be given permission to dream. And I think the bigger that you dream and the more that you go, you'll never lose. You'll always win because things don't have to look like normal life. The Lord's creative and he's set you up for such greatness and he's set you up for so much success. And the success of those around us and the success of the world don't necessarily bring the depth of the Lord's success. So you'll always win when you're on his side.
Last point, I think it takes a childlike heart and a spirit to achieve your dreams.
Right.
To do that. I think it's not, you said earlier, like, oh, it feels like kind of childish to do it. And the Bible holds it as a high value to be childlike. Because if you're childlike, you're teachable.
Right.
And if you're teachable, you'll be able to catch any vision. Yeah. You'll be able to hear anything from the Lord and not say, oh, I could never do that.
Right.
You'll say, oh, I could do that?
Right.
And say, okay, let's figure it out. And now that you're an adult and you have the skill set and you have the resources, you have the people around you to be able to do something. If you bring in that childlikeness and that vision that is uncapped, you're unstoppable.
Yes, you're unstoppable. That's the word. Well, I hope that encourages you because that is the exciting part of being able to create vision for your life. We can have these big overarching pillars of vision, and then we also can have these smaller little areas of vision that speak into every realm. And you were created for such a time as this. You have greatness on the inside of you. And I just want to even encourage you, don't compare yourself to others. Don't compare your vision to other people's vision because it's going to cut short the gifts that are on the inside of you. It's that opportunity to be able to speak into other people's vision, to celebrate their vision, and to excel forward in yours. For such a time as this, you were created and you carry the depths of a beautiful vision inside of you.
They catch me on my way up, watch me, not slowing down and I'm not saying sorry. Keep on fighting like it's all or nothing. Not coming down, not coming down. Hold on tight because it's gonna get real.
Do you have any feedback?